Hello all, and welcome to the first installment of Let's Design a Trading Card Game. So when it comes to trading card games, the first thing you can do is take a look at other games you've played. I've laid out an assortment of cards from games I've played throughout the years and enjoyed, and you can sort of get some inspiration from them, kind of learn general basics that certain games have, such as life systems, resource systems, and you can kind of look at some and you can say, oh, yeah, I like the ramping up of one energy or mana at a time, like in Magic. Or you can say, oh, well, I kind of like the more fast-paced version of combat and buddy fight. So you can try and determine which parts of each of these games you like, and then you can just kind of morph those into some type of vision that you have for your own game. Something important to note is that once you've gathered this list of aspects of these games that you like, you don't have to use them all. Some of them won't mesh very well, obviously, depending on what your game is like, but we're just kind of getting ideas right now, just trying to see what we like and what we think people who play our game will like. For example, you might like tribute summoning in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or the trap card feature where they play a face down and then you have to sort of try to guess what they laid and try to get around it. You might like triggers in Vanguard where you take the top card of your deck and reveal it and see if you get an added bonus effect that can add some level of fun to your game, where each situation might be different depending on what trigger you might get. You might like just the give and take tempo game, like Magic or Hearthstone are pretty fun for that reason. You're kind of battling with your opponent, trying to win an edge to win the board. So yeah. And a good game will have options to use a lot of different play styles, I think. So, like, if you are an aggro player, or if you're a combo player, or control, I feel like each game should have some semblance of these types, because then if I play card games and I stumble upon your game, then no matter what play style I'm known for in other games, I can find something somewhat related in your game, and that can kind of give me more of an edge, give me more of a familiarity, because well, if you make your game unique, you obviously do want it to be unique, but if it's too unique, then it might not be familiar enough for people to want to try it. So you want to find a balance there, I think. You want to find something where people think, oh, this is new, this is exciting, but you don't want them to think, oh, I don't even know what I'm looking at here, you know, I have no idea how this would play out. So next I was thinking of looking at a game I had made when I was a kid and try to compare it to the ideas I made when looking at other card games. And if you didn't make a game, that's totally fine already. You know, if you're coming in brand new, that's totally okay. But I was just thinking it would be a good reference point to start off, for both game mechanics and for the aesthetic of the game, which we also have to decide on. So if we're just looking at mechanics, which we've been discussing in this video, apologize for my handwriting, by the way, but so the basic mechanic of this game was that you would have a warlord, and then you had these units, and they could be placed in 5 slots around it. And in this game, you could only attack in the same column. So like, if this is my opponent's card, it can only attack this card, and then if this column was empty, then it could attack my warlord. So when you're thinking of certain mechanics, like let's say I was designing this game, I don't think I would do the column thing again, but just for hypothetical, we're gonna say, let's say I really want these columns to work, so I'm gonna think common question in a game is, when you play a card, can you attack with it that turn or not? And some games say yes, some games say no. So for this game, let's say I don't want to be able to attack first, so I try that. So I play this, and then it can't attack until my next turn. So that sounds good in theory for balancing a game, especially if there's not much of a cost system, which this game didn't really have. But then you have to think about it in testing, and you have to test it later on, and you will find out that in a situation like this, the game will quickly turn into just this sort of backwards combat, if you will, where whoever dominates in one column will just stay there for basically the whole game, because if I have two things that I can attack, and I overwhelm my opponent's column here, and they can't attack me back on their turn, there would be no point in them continuing in this column. So then they would just focus on this column or this column, but this column only has one card. So generally what would happen is one player would control one side and the other player would control the other, and they would just throw down little cheap units to block their attacks. And it was just sort of an unsatisfying game state. So if I were to do columns again, I would say that being able to attack with a card right when you play it would be probably best for that system. But then for other games, like Magic is probably the most famous for summoning sickness, where you can't attack right when you play a card, and the game would be completely different if you could attack right when you played a card. Like, everything would be different. So these are things you have to think about when you're trying to narrow down certain aspects of your game. Once you've found a few mechanics that you really like, an important thing to keep in mind or remember is that these mechanics can have some negative effects as well, and you just want to kind of look out for them and potentially fix them if you can. So using this old game as an example again, the resource system was called Will, and this was before the card game Force of Will came out, so I can't use that anymore, but how that worked was, at the beginning of each turn you would draw a card, and then you would take the top card of your deck and you would put it face up in your Will area, and then if I wanted to play a card, I would just pay a Will by putting it in the drop, and then I could play it depending on its cost. I think some cost more, some cost less, and so what I did with this was, I had some cards would have effects that dealt with the Will, so I could call this from the Will, and then I could get two more. And then there were cards in the deck that could choose specific cards to put in the Will, so then I could kind of combo them. And that was a fun aspect of this deck. But something I didn't think about at the time was that there are certain opinions on resource systems like this, where if you're just looking at the top card of your deck and you're putting it somewhere else, you're not able to play that card in most cases. So mainly this is an argument against like life decking and things like that, where you're just cards in your deck are just being used as this resource, even though you could have used them to play them. So like if you have a certain combo or a big finisher, you know, it would feel bad to lose that. So there are certain ways to get around that. For example, let's say instead of taking the top card of my deck and putting it over here, I could instead like draw a card and then choose a card from my hand to will it. That's common for a lot of games, like Dragon Ball Super, and Duel Masters was the first, or one of the first to do that, I believe. And then additionally, let's say instead of using this and putting it in the discard, let's say after I use this resource, I put it on the bottom of my deck. And so depending on how often I shuffle or how often I can look at the deck and pick cards out of it, that may help or may not. So you just kind of have to look at things in different contexts and find out what you think works, and then when you do, you have to look at potential negatives and see if you can minimize those if possible. So I don't think any game mechanic is inherently bad or negative on the player. I think it all depends on the context of your rules and the context of your cards. So just for some final thoughts, I think what you really have to ask yourself is, what do I think would be fun for me? Like, for me, I feel like a really close game is really fun, where each turn you don't know who's gonna win. So it's down to that last second, you know. I think those games are really fun, but other people might think other things are really fun. And so once you find what would be fun, you have to kind of ask yourself which game mechanics would help create this sense of fun most consistent, because card games are a little inconsistent at times. You have to draw your deck, you have to draw your hand. You only get so many cards out of the deck in most games, so you have to design the cards in a way where more games than less will be fun. So you have to look at, you know, should a card be able to attack when you play it? What should your combat stats look like? Do you want attack and defense, or do you just want one stat? How much life should each player have? What should you be able to do on your opponent's turn? You know, should you be able to have a response to everything or only to their attacks? You know, how should the resource system look like? Do you want to use deck as resource or deck as life? It's all really just these small decisions that add up to a well-working game. It's kind of like a machine, you know, you have to find these little parts, they add up, make sure they work right, and then overall the machine as a whole will work right too. So I'm going to take my ideas, I'm going to workshop with them, test them out. You should feel free to do the same, and I will meet you back here once I have some more ideas and we can do video 2. Thanks for watching. See you next time.